Hello, hello, comrades! Welcome back to another episode of me shouting into the void, but this time we have a guest.
Hello, I'm David. It's Marxist Leninist of Britain on Twitter, and my Twitter's mainly just little takes, my information that I think I give to the world, and also jokes and fun, obviously.
Beautiful little snippets and everything. So what we wanted to go ahead and talk about today was mostly like Corbynism and like the failures of electoralism, especially with the more recent elections in Britain here. But when we say electoralism, what is it that we mean?
The definition I'm using is the act of transitioning from capitalism to socialism using liberal bourgeois apparatus only. So, no revolutionary party, no revolutionary struggle, just simply using their elections to slowly but surely, through reforms and Labour Party, bringing about the world that we want to see.
Yeah, and I think that should be the main, general definition that we use for the term, because you need to remember, like, with that in mind, and what everyone needs to understand, especially those of us on the left, is, like, engaging in bourgeois electoral process is not in and of itself counter-revolutionary. That's an ultra talking point that needs to be countered. It's really only bad when that's all you're doing, right? It should be a single tool in the toolbox and not the only tool you have, right? It's a tool that we should exploit, right, when we can. The real problem comes when like that's all you do.
Yeah, and the problem is some people put all their energy into elections, and through testing, through reforms that we have gained, like Roosevelt's New Deal in America, we've come to realise that all these reforms will be dismantled and the state will take back our rights unless we form a coherent ideology behind a party, as well as sometimes engaging in electoralism where we see fit.
Exactly, yeah, and we should be willing to, as Marxist-Leninists, as communists, to be meeting the proletariat where they are, and in the West specifically, and obviously when I say West, it's a very, nebulous term, but you still understand what I mean. The proletariat tend to be at the booths, at the voting booths, mostly, when it comes to those who are politically active, and we should be trying to gain those people under our wing.
Exactly, and this is where Jeremy Corbyn comes in very nicely, because Jeremy Corbyn, for the first time in many years, not like Tony Blair, not like Miliband, he's an actual left candidate who obviously will not bring about socialism by himself, but he can create better conditions for the working class, and also brilliant anti-imperialist stances, which is important for the countries under the boot of the British bourgeois and the British people themselves.
Exactly, and that's kind of why you approached me with this topic in mind, because the election that happened was an incredible piece of history, especially for the British left as a whole. Now, we came up with a few points here on, how we wanted to talk about everything. Where did you want to start with this? Because I have, my notes in front of me, what I could talk about specifically, but I didn't know if you wanted to lead us off, or...
I think we could go first with Corbyn's general stances, and you could lead us off.
Okay, beautiful, yeah. Let me go ahead and get to that real quick. There we go. So, first things first, we need to understand that, like, the things I'm going to be talking about right now are more general to the Labour Party specifically. Obviously, Corbyn had a huge part in a lot of these policies because he's the leader of the party itself. But because he's a part of a greater whole, right, a lot of his stances in and of themselves are hard to differentiate between his own personal stance and the stance of the party itself. So I just want to put that out there real quick. And if I'm wrong about anything, go ahead and yell at me in the comments or on Twitter. But in general, right, Corbyn held quite a few beliefs over his years in Labour, right? But we're going to be focusing more on the 2015 to 2019 general platform while holding within the party, specifically the 2019 manifesto that the party created and was thrown around. In the foreword, it seems to be like any other foreword, just kind of like an overview of what was chatted about, right? A vague statement about rewriting the rules of the economy to work for you, investment in modern production, focus on green industrial revolution with, focus on the railways, renewable energy, and electric vehicles, the creation of climate-related jobs, the nationalization of mail, water, energy, and rail. All right, I guess in rail's case would be the renationalization of it. This one's kind of neat. The free fiber broadband for everyone, so free internet. That was a point you brought up earlier while we were kind of discussing some of these things off the air, where that would save, the average, British person enormous sums of money, and it allowed them a lot of freedom. The focus on the focus on removing the need of food banks, right? Like, you shouldn't have these charity organizations feeding the people for you. That should be, the state's job. The living wage of £10 an hour, national education service, more funding for the National Health Service, the end of the social care crisis, funding of public services, end of war interventions, and then of course the big one for this particular election was Brexit being sorted in 6 months, 3 months to plan, and then 3 months to discuss and vote about that plan. That seemed to be the biggest one on this general list. Am I missing anything specifically?
I think it covers his platform quite well, and because he gets a lot of comparisons to, obviously, Bernie Sanders in the United States, and I think where we can deviate the both of them is Jeremy Corbyn has a better non-intervention, non-imperialist stance than Bernie Sanders, and his history backs that up.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Bernie having quite a few blemishes on that record, Yugoslavia namely.
Yeah, and then when you're talking about the 2019 manifesto, this is where we can go into the comparisons from 2017 to 2019 and why Labour fell so drastically from a brilliant election in 2017 and almost stopping the Tories from gaining power to 2019 basically handing the Tories full power of the United Kingdom. And the main point comes in where in 2017 the Labour Party was a party of Brexit. They said they were going to get Brexit done. They were going to have a more people-oriented Brexit. Whereas in 2019, they said they would do the second referendum, which alienated many northern voters who voted Brexit because they saw their jobs being taken away. And whether it was true that Brexit was going to solve these problems, they voted for it. And that was the mandate, and that's why Labour lost so many seats.
Yeah, I mean, this election in and of itself, it seems like it was artificially brought towards a more a Brexit-focused kind of election cycle, right? Where it was very focused on that one particular topic, very artificially, right? That should not have been the main focus of what these elections were, yet that's very much how they were vocalized.
Yeah, most definitely, and that's obviously another difference between 2017 and 2019 is Theresa May and Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson had the ability to purge his party of any dissenters, as well as making people form behind him for the Get Brexit Done slogan. And the media also fell in line to the Get Brexit Done motive.
Mm-hmm. And I guess that kind of that does actually slightly tie in with a general point of the struggles within Labour itself, right? Corbyn, while having the uncanny ability to draw a bunch of support from outside the party, it seems like if you look at his history within the party itself, it is very much mired with the party being against him, right? multiple different little coup attempts, especially the big one being in I think it was 2016, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, where it was it was this big kind of like little coup, right? Where there was a huge vote of no confidence, with a landslide, more than 80% of the MPs, about 172 people voting against him. Corbyn then saying that this vote wasn't constitutional within the party, so really nothing could be done about it. But then two people specifically, I think their names were Angela Eagle and Owen Smith, right?
Yeah.
Those names right?
Yeah, Owen Smith was the leader of the coup.
Yeah, they both had they both basically challenged him to leadership. Angela Engel basically dropping out almost after Owen Smith said that he was going to as well, and then she's pledged his support to him. They declared a challenge of leadership. Election had to be done at that point, and then he gained even more support from the people than his original election in 2015, with 61.8% of the vote, and kept his leadership role. So it completely backfired, but still there was this complete inability of Corbyn almost to be able to rein in the party under his leadership, and it definitely showed later on.
Yeah, and this is the separation of the Parliamentary Labour Party and the Membership Labour Party. The Parliamentary Labour Party is still very much a party of Tony Blair, whereas the Membership Labour Party is a party of mainly Corbyn supporters, because they all joined the party to get Corbyn elected initially and re-elected him after the coup. And this is where Corbyn should have been more harsh on dissenters and took control of the party, and this is where the cracks started to show in Corbyn's leadership, because of his unwillingness to act with stern and kick these dissenters out of the party, since they were going against the mandate of the Labour Party, against the people who uphold the Labour Party, who fund the Labour Party, and who without there would not be a Labour Party. And this is where it comes into the fact that the Parliamentary Labour Party also, again, they backed doing a second referendum, and it just shows you the undermining that's going on and on and on within the Labour Party, and Jeremy Corbyn's unwillingness to act.
Yeah, it seems like there was a large that was probably Labour's biggest weakness, was its inability to control itself, and that huge split within the party kind of kept it from coming to concise conclusions, especially when it seemed like the right in that country really focused hard on building a Brexit line, a line that Labour seemed kind of not really willing to stamp on, right? Especially when, now correct me if I'm wrong, right? Because this was kind of weird for me to try to research, but it looked like Corbyn at one point was very much in the camp of Brexit, we need to leave. It's dumb. Let's just get out.
Most definitely, yeah.
But the party itself tiptoed around that really hard. They never really put all of their support behind that general idea, and obviously the right's campaign to make Brexit the main topic of discussion really won them the day there, because they succeeded in their plans of making this a Brexit election, when there were definitely a lot more things that the British people should have been focusing on. Those things were kind of thrown under the bus entirely, and a lot of Labour's really really decent policy proposals were just kind of thrust aside for some nebulous idea of leaving for really shitty reasons, brown people, etc.
Yeah, and obviously the EU has always been a neoliberal organisation supported by people like David Cameron, Margaret Thatcher, Tony Blair, So it's never been a left-wing utopia that some people like to paint it as. It's not some god that gave people workers' rights. People had to fight for their rights. So it's very offensive when people say that the European Union provided British people with the workers' rights when the miners' strikes and many other strikes were the reason workers got rights. Workers got rights by giving, in some cases, their lives, their livelihood, and sacrificing themselves to create a better world for us all. It wasn't the benevolent hand of the European Union that improved things for us.
And what strikes me as even odder is that a lot of those struggles happened within the early Labour Party. So I'm incredibly surprised that Labour didn't, jump on their history and utilize their past to kind of build a counter argument from it. Because, and like, I can only say so much being in the United States. Obviously, our country doesn't really show the electoral processes of other countries too often. We really only get the highlights, but I don't remember seeing, on Twitter or through media here, any sort of counter argument from Labour saying like our history is in the struggle, and you're completely throwing that idea of all of the good work that workers have done in the toilet by just saying the EU gave it to us. Right, like I didn't see them utilize their history. Is that wrong? Am I mistaken? Did they do that at all, or?
No, you're definitely not wrong. But I think this also feeds into the media's role within the election and how they took control of the narratives, which aided the Tory party, which is obvious because the media is a bourgeois tool of the elections. And the main narratives I would say that the media created was, we'll go with the first one, which was Jeremy Corbyn being anti-Semitic, which is laughable considering he's a man that's fought for anti-racism, anti-apartheid, everything. They painted the narrative that because he was against apartheid in Palestine, he was anti-Semitic. And some of the lies, just to show you how idiotic and desperate the media were. At one point, they claimed he was a Czechoslovakian spy that sold British secrets to the Czechoslovakian government, which was founded on no lies. That he was an ally to the IRA within Britain, in the sense of he supported the bombing campaign, which isn't true. He met with the IRA to form peace agreements, to try and keep people alive, to try and give Ireland back what is theirs, which was then turned on to say that he was pro-terrorist, which feeds into the narrative of Corbyn as a security threat for the United Kingdom.
Ooh,
the media
spooky.
has this. The media has, this fetishism with nuclear bombs, and they kept asking Jeremy Corbyn if in any scenario he would use nuclear bombs on another country, and his answer was very simple: mutual destruction saves no one. We would all die. The whole line of nuclear bombs is that we use them so we don't have to use them, which was shattered by the media pressing time and time again, basically saying, Jeremy Corbyn, why won't you murder millions of innocent people? Which he succinctly said, we should scrap Trident, which is the submarine that goes around the United Kingdom, filled with nuclear bombs, ready to murder hundreds of thousands of people at the click of a button.
Yeah, God knows who, for God knows what reason.
Exactly, and trillions and trillions of pounds have been spent on it, and Jeremy Corbyn basically said that money could be better spent.
Yeah, it could be better spent on literally anything, namely the main platform that was given, making sure everyone can go to school okay, and everyone can be cared for, with medication, and making sure that everyone's able to get everywhere they need to with proper rail systems, and ensuring that, utilities like mail, water, and energy are all paid for, and everyone can have them, right? And ensuring the planet doesn't die, the important things. And not systematically glassing an entire country because they said the wrong things to a particular British businessman.
Exactly. And another narrative was, obviously, we spoke before, the Brexit election. And it came to a forefront in this, what can only be described as a just a complete joke of a moment where the panelists on, I believe, Sky TV were sat behind the panel, and the panel in the front of it said the Brexit election. And then they asked John McDonnell, why did Labour lose this election? And he said because of the Brexit stance. And then they, with no irony, said Brexit was not the only issue in this election.
Brexit was definitely not the only one, but it really did seem like that was the one point that continued to be brought up. That media from what it seemed, or like obviously like all the corporate media seemed to be like really focusing down on it, but even like smaller, leftist media, even within the United States, seemed to be putting a lot of energy towards Brexit. So I guess my question to you would be like, how important was Brexit really for, or not how important was it for the election? Because obviously the way everything was framed, it did end up becoming an incredibly important point, one that Labour wasn't really willing to fight on. But as far as everything else is concerned, how important would you place the topic? Intervention aside, like, how important would you say Brexit actually should have been?
Yeah, I wouldn't lie and say Brexit wasn't very important, because it was, in the sense of Labour going against a mandate from the people, which is never a good thing, especially when you're meant to be a party of the people. And it did upset many people. It upset loads of people that we wasn't going to be leaving the European Union when we said we was, and how the Labour Party were part of the problem. But then, like you say, the media used it, which is where the Liberal Democrats come into this election, where you had Jo Swinson on telly saying that she could be the next Prime Minister, which is impossible.
I remember hearing some stuff about that.
Yeah. But she was basically used as a puppet for the Tory party to try and drag the Labour Party to the centre on the Brexit issue, which she was very successful at. And again, on the media, the thing with the media was not just that they were attacking Jeremy Corbyn, it was that they were not holding Boris Johnson to account. There's an interviewer called Andrew Neil in the United Kingdom on the BBC, which is the national television, and he's the premier interviewer in the country, and Corbyn went on his show, but Johnson didn't. And it's just showing that they're not holding everyone to the same standards.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, why would they hold him to the same standards as everyone else, especially when they constantly belittle him with bullshit claims every other moment they can. Being a security threat or being anti-Semitic, stuff like that. Like, they never really held the Conservative Party to account for all the claims they made and everything like that. That was never done. It was just, everything was just kind of taken at face value.
Oh, most definitely. And I guess this is where we can bring in the Brexit Party / the UKIP Party influence on the election. And their influence comes before the election ever started. Their influence comes from Nigel Farage making the Tory party a party of Brexit, which is not what they ever wanted to be, hence why David Cameron stepped down as leader once Brexit happened. And Nigel Farage is a London banker turned bigot who created the Brexit Party and was the head of the UKIP Party before the Brexit Party. And some of UKIP's manifesto pledges were taking LGBTQ education out of schools, slowing down migration, just to give an example of the kind of party they are. And at one point they had control of the Tory party because the Tory party was losing votes to them very, very quickly. In a similar sense that Labour lost vote because of Brexit, the Conservative Party did to start with, which is why they had to take the stance of Brexit, which changed the narrative from Brexit being a leftist movement to Brexit being a racist movement.
Yeah, it was like this call for like just general referendum, I feel, like on the EU and on leaving, which the Conservatives really didn't want to do from the scenes of it. Really seemed to move them to the right, just as a whole, right? And then of course like the Brexit Party hijacking the conversation and then drumming up racism certainly didn't help anybody.
Yeah, and when, as I say, Nigel Farage is a racist man. There's no doubt about it.
Well, he was
Boris
a banker.
Johnson,
Do you expect anything else?
exactly. Boris Johnson is also an extremely racist man, and he would have not been able to come into power of the Conservative Party without the help of the Brexit Party. So although the Brexit Party does not hold any seat in the British Parliament, they're used as a kind of in a similar way that the Green Party try and bring up the environment, the Brexit Party were the Greens of racism, I guess. And yeah.
Yeah, so just overall, this seemingly like this move, this collaboration of different parties on the right, kind of helped cement this general idea that like Brexit is the conversation that needs to be had, and all other topics are moot essentially, which really did hurt the Labour Party's platform, considering they seemingly didn't really want to touch Brexit too much, other than we need to fight the people on the right, so we need to stay. They really feel like they held on to that particular viewpoint, which obviously I don't think Corbyn liked very much. But it feels to me that like they fell into a trap because they weren't able to successfully utilize their other platforms, right? Their other, other ideas here, the free broadband, the nationalization of public services, help, like climate change specifically. That should have been a really, really big point, but I don't feel like it was talked a lot. Again, all of this coming from the perspective of someone in the U.S., but I just didn't hear any of that. I didn't hear from any of that from people of Britain on the people in Britain on Twitter or on Facebook or anything like that. I didn't really hear anyone talk about any of those other platforms other than Brexit. That's all we got. That's all I ever heard from anyone was Brexit, 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 Brexit. And I feel that was a huge weakness for Labour, because they had this huge platform, this huge general idea of like things they wanted to do, but they were really forced into playing the Brexit game that they didn't want to play, and did not do the things needed to change that talking point.
Yeah, and I think this circles round back to the main point of electoralism and its uses and why it's not the only thing we should use, because like we say, the left don't control the elections, the bourgeoisie do, and it is their elections. It's not democracy. It's a facade. But I would still say, if there is a Corbyn to vote for, you should vote for him. And I would say it's the same with Bernie Sanders, because although they are not the ideal of what we want, they are much better than the alternatives for people in their own country and people abroad.
Oh, of course. It's one of those things where it is, to some degree, damage reduction, right? You have these people who are putting up the offer of saying, hey, look, you should be able to afford your medication. You should be able to get to work without having to rely on, a very expensive piece of equipment that you can't afford. You should be able to, have all of these things just in general provided to you. Be able to go to school, be able to get medicine, be able to, travel without this large burden on you. And I feel that we win regardless, right? it doesn't matter how that turns out. It doesn't matter if that narrative is nothing more than a lie, right? Because the narrative was brought up, and we are in a position to benefit regardless, right? Us, like, on the left. Because if they do end up, pushing through what they wanted to push through, or what they say they want to push through, right? Like, for Corbyn, let's say that, he got into office and was able to, nationalize all the things he wanted to, or, like, give free broadband to everyone, and, focus on removing food banks, all those kinds of stuff. And let's say, like, Bernie got elected and he was able to do his, Medicare for all and everything. Great. We got these things that actually benefit people and saves a lot of lives and gets a lot of shit done. We are now in a position where we could say, well, why don't we do more and push it further left, right? Because now these ideas are in people's heads and they're freshly there. It's now perfect ammunition for us to use. If they lose, right, in the case of Corbyn, right, because he lost, or, like, let's say Bernie loses, or they get in and they aren't capable of doing what they promised, right, it is now we are in a position to gather up all the people who felt abandoned, who feel lost, or, now apathetic. We are now capable of helping those people understand this was always going to happen, right? And get them to understand that this is a fraud and that it's never been here for you, right? It's there to benefit the 1%, the rich, the capitalist, right? It's never been to benefit the worker. And then get them radicalized and moving towards building a society that does do the things that are promised.
Exactly, and especially it's about language being introduced into the Overton window, so to say. Like, before Corbyn, nobody had even uttered the word socialism who was in any powerful position within Britain for God knows how long, or the 99 versus the 1% narrative. These become part of British conversation to a point where the media cannot ignore them. These become part of the narrative, and then people are more likely to find a Lenin, a Castro, a Mao, a Stalin, and realise the things that Jeremy Corbyn is saying are not Corbynism, but rather socialism, and hopefully, down the line, Marxism, Leninism, and we can push more people into our movements.
Yeah, exactly. And when you go on to... I think it's irresponsible to, like, judge Twitter as, like, how the left acts with certain things, because it just simply isn't. Considering Twitter is wholly divorced from like physical movements a lot of the time. But it's hard to deny that when you do look at Twitter or you look at Facebook or any other like social media, and you see the left's general response to these things as being just like, ignore it, it's worthless, it doesn't do anything. I saw one person, a person I really respect on Twitter. I'm not going to like name drop them here because that would be disrespectful. But one of the posts they said was like, you can't say that acting in these elections is harm reduction because the $50 million like Bernie spent on his campaign so far would have been better utilized elsewhere. But you need to, like, this kind of negativity doesn't help us at all, because yes, it's never us who are acting within these electoral systems as a whole, right? Like, no one's saying that the Communist Party of Great Britain or the CPUSA should be running candidates and spending millions upon millions upon millions of dollars advertising. Maybe run a candidate just to get a name out there and has a talking point. Maybe do a few speeches. But no one's advocating throwing all of this money into this process. No, what we should be using the election system is as a platform to bring up ideas to. When Bernie or Corbyn act in these elections, they're basically just a tool that we should be utilizing. Again, going back to the idea that we win regardless of what they do. Right? If they fail and they don't get elected, or they get elected and they aren't capable of getting past the Parliament or the House to pass reforms and to do the things they want to do, if they fail in their core idea, we are capable of radicalizing the population, or even further, right? Just snap, and it's done. It takes little effort to do that, as long as a proper party system's already in place. If they do all the things they want to do, and they are capable of acting, we are now capable, much like how the left in the United States did with FDR, right? Like the New Deal. That was a coalition of leftist parties and organizations in the United States forcing his hand, right? These things can then be forced to do more. We can do more things. We can force those in power to do more because they've already made promises and they've already were able to establish some basic things. So then the line of reasoning comes, why can't we do more? And we can push them to do more. And of course, if eventually getting to the point where they can't do more anymore and they have to start pushing back, and at that point we can start radicalizing the population again. Acting within electoralism alone, as we've stated earlier, is worthless. It doesn't do anything. It's a waste of resources and a waste of political energy. But utilizing it as a tool for radicalization is something that is a no-brainer, right? Like Lenin said, you support it like a rope supports a hanged man, right? You are supporting it insofar as you're eventually going to destroy it with its own energy.
Yeah, and I think that rounds the conversation on electoralism and the failure of Corbyn and the Labour Party within the United Kingdom off quite well, to a point where we can say, do party politics, be a Marxist-Leninist, but it's a science. You've got to look at the environment which you live in, and I'm sorry, but within the United Kingdom at the moment, there is not going to be a proletariat revolution. So for the time being, we should have got Jeremy Corbyn into power. We failed. Now it's time to try and build a real revolutionary party. And I guess unite. Workers of the world unite.
Yeah, no, totally. Especially right now. Within Britain, I can only imagine it should be a prime breeding ground for new members into Marxist-Leninist movements in the country. If those parties that already exist capitalize on the failure of Corbyn, right, on the failure of Labour, and on the failure of electoralism as a whole, right, those things can be capitalized on and can be taken advantage of, and that should be our duty, right? It should be our duty to teach the proletariat and to absorb them into our movements and to grow together, right? Like, we should be. The United States has much to benefit from the British left, and the British left has much to benefit from the U.S. left, and that this goes for literally every movement on the planet, and so yes, take these failures and run with them, right? Because we have the power to do so.
Yeah, and just do everything within your power to try and create a revolutionary proletariat. Do the work that you see fit, from each according to their ability to each according to their need, is our central dogma, and that is how we should act at all times.
Most definitely. All right. Yeah, I think we kind of covered everything we wanted to. Was there any other last minute things you wanted to say before we round things up? I'm not missing anything important, am I? My notes say I'm not.
Nah, I think we covered everything. I guess I would just say, read Marx, read Lenin, read Stalin, Mao, anyone you see fit. Educate yourself, educate others, do your work, and create a movement.
Yeah, it's really it really can be just as simple as educating yourself and then educating others. Well, I definitely want to thank you for coming on today and reaching out to me to do this. It was a lot of fun. I think next time, if I ever do something like this in the future, to take it one step further and not just do a live recording on here and then edit it down later, but to do like a live stream or something with it, because I think that would be fun. And I'd love to talk to you again.
Yeah, of course.
In that kind of environment. So again, I appreciate you being on, everyone. I hope you have a fantastic day. See you again soon.
Bye-bye.
The commonwealth of toil that is to be. They would keep us cowed and beaten, cringing meekly at their feet. They would stand between each worker and his bread. Shall we yield our lives up to them for the bitter crust we eat? Shall we only hope for heaven when we're dead?